We'll move on, Keith, and talk about Leicester City, because there were some reports that their points deduction case is going to continue beyond the start of the season. What's your thoughts on that piece of news?
It's a very complex case, the Leicester one, because it involves two leagues. And also Leicester's sort of own attack, suing both the Premier League and the EFL, has meant that things have got even more complex because they're certainly not going to be the ones that will benefit from a 2-point deduction for having acted to try and help the whole case. They've actually done the opposite. So the timelines involved then in hearing all those cases together, and now you've got the Premier League one that comes from the season they were last in the Premier League as well. Then you've got the EFL one about last season when they got promoted. Then you've got to hear the cases that Leicester have put themselves in against the EFL and the Premier League. There's no doubt there's going to be points deductions, I believe, and it could be 6, it could be more. As I say, I don't see any deductions for good behaviour because of the way they've acted. I don't know what the EFL are going to do. This is a multi-layered case that has gone beyond the complexity of Everton. We're now going to have an independent commission, which will come to a completely different solution than the ones we'd had before, and we'll never understand what it is until we've read it. So we're going to be another mess. And Leicester, meanwhile, as I've always said, have probably taken the right decision to go into the Premier League and fight it while they're there and see what they can do around that. But they better start performing pretty quickly out of the blocks, because I think they're going to have at least 6 points, if not more, deducted. And if they were to go down if they get relegated, then I think going down to the EFL, they may face points deductions again in the EFL next season when they go down. So it's not a great place for them right now. I don't know where they're going to be in terms of spending right now. I think they've got problems with PSR as well. So building that squad that's going to be successful enough to handle a points deduction is going to be pretty tricky for Leicester. So I think I'd be looking at Leicester's position next year with a bit of jeopardy.
And Keith, does their talking of sort of transfer news, does their business depend on this points deduction? And actually, should that therefore mean the process is sped up so that at least they can make some signings before the beginning of the season, the end of the transfer window? Where will they stand from that point of view?
Well, I'm sure they'd love to have a quick solution if they could do, but I think a lot of the delay is of their own making. So it's not really the problem that we can point at the Premier League this time. It's Leicester's own making. But I think their own business in the transfer window this summer is going to be dictated more by PSR issues rather than the points deduction. So they're going to have to go ahead and build a squad, and they've got to try and do it with, I think, sort of young, players from the academy, players from the Championship they can afford, because they're going to be pretty constrained. So they're in a very tough place right now.
And Keith, you don't see them that they will be making big signings potentially. Then, given that sort of worry with PSR, this ongoing potential breach, it might look like actually potentially, say, free agents or players from the academy that will hopefully step up and sort of match the levels of the Premier League.
Very much so. That's what I think they've got to try and do, is put together the dirty dozen that can actually, really fight it out and slog it out and try and stay in the Premiership with a big points deduction. That's not easy. And so it's not so they can sign a bunch of Galacticos and go ahead and try and not worry about the points. So I've got them penciled in for one of my relegation spots for next year.
Wow, it's an early doors call, Keith. We're talking of that in terms of their managerial vacancy. We know that's still open and up for grabs. Seems potentially Graham Potter, Steve Cooper are sort of the top choices for that job. What are your thoughts on those candidates, and actually who would be the preferred choice for them both, do you think?
Well, I see Graham Potter is linked heavily, as you say, and I don't know if that really would be the right appointment in my view. Nothing to do with the Graham Potter's skills. I think he's a very skilled manager, but I think he's going to be facing some real issues around points deductions and noise around the club this season. And I don't think that really fits his style of management. I see Steve Cooper more as a scrapper and a fighter. He's had a lot of issues and noise around his time at Notts Forest. I think that's an understatement, to say the least. And so I think he's probably more suited to that sort of environment that I think Leicester will be having to handle next year. Look, there's no doubt Potter is a great manager. And if things can get resolved, then good luck to them. I think he'd be a fantastic manager for the future. But I do think the environment they're going into next year is going to be a very tough one. A lot of distractions off the pitch. And I think it's going to be very hard to try and have that sort of creative, innovative way that Graham Potter tries to work, I think there's going to be too much noise off the pitch. But that's just my opinion.
So, Keith, is sort of, in your view, then potentially their best bet, given sort of the issues with PSR and those potential breaches, is it best that they look at someone sort of from a short-term stopgap point of view, look to sort of bring a manager in who could solidify them through this sort of period of turmoil, keep them up, and then for next season look at somebody else? And actually, how realistic would that be, do you think?
That's exactly what I think they should be doing. I think they need to get a manager who's keen on hand-to-hand combat and really slog it through and try and reset. But then again, if the manager can do that for you, you probably want to remain faithful to him and see where it can go. But in reality, I think they're in for a very, very tough season. So they've got to pick somebody who can get them through this season somehow.
And are we expecting any big sales, Keith, potentially from sort of the King Power? Could we see potentially the likes of Keane and Dewsbury Hall leaving in the summer? Or actually, do you think their squad will try and stay sort of solid through this period potentially of difficulty?
No, I think they're going to have to sell. I think, again, PSR requirements mean they're going to have to sell 2 or 3 of their top players. They're going to have to get the wage bill down. And at the same time, they're going to have to bring enough talent in to survive in the Premiership. It's a very, very tough order. But listen, good luck to them all. Again, that's probably a weakness in the bigger picture here about the PSR requirements. That I've got sympathy for them, as I did have with Forest and Everton last year. If we're going to really try and make the league competitive, we've got to find a way to assist clubs like Leicester to try and do that. But nevertheless, they broke those rules, and so they will be penalised, and that's where we are at the moment.
And Keith, talking about that, though, if we sort of sum that case up that they might be going through, looking at potential Premier League and EFL breaches, do you feel that's fair if they are to come up and they're fighting on 2 fronts? Or actually, do you think these rules do need to be looked at and changed for clubs that are to be promoted?
Well, I think that I've been campaigning for a while that there should be some sort of allowance, probably for 3 seasons for promoted clubs. Nothing's happened in that change. I was even amazed at the recent summer meeting that there wasn't even an increase in the £105 million loss threshold that goes on with the PSR requirements. So it seems the clubs are happy with it. And I just, for the life of me, don't understand that.